Imagine walking into your local grocery store and realizing half the food you grew up with is gone. Not sold out, gone, replaced by brands and products you've never seen before. Quietly behind the scenes, America's oldest food partners are breaking decades-long loyalties and turning to Canada instead. And the craziest part? It's not about price. It's about trust, stability, and who shows up when times get tough. These are 9 major countries that just stopped sending food to the United States, and the surprising reasons why Canada is now their #1 choice. Number 8 and 9 on this list will leave you astonished. Number 1, Germany. Blocks of aged Gouda and wheels of Emmental that once arrived in high-end US markets now skip American ports entirely, heading straight to refrigerated warehouses in Toronto and Montreal. In 2025, Germany's Agricultural Export Authority quietly diverted nearly 1/3 of its gourmet food shipments from the US to Canada. Why? While the US tightened enforcement on European dairy imports, Canada offered easier access. Ontario distributors like Arla Foods moved fast to lock in deals. In the first half of 2025, Canadian imports of German meats, mustards, and baked goods jumped 28%. Meanwhile, U.S. cities saw empty shelves where bratwurst and rye crisps used to be. Even German grocery chains Aldi and Lidl shifted more investment into Canadian hubs, making cities like Hamilton and Laval their staging points for continental supply. To Germany's trade reps, Canada is now their North American anchor, a title once reserved for Los Angeles or Miami. Number 2, Brazil. Brazil, one of the world's largest agricultural exporters, has executed one of the decade's biggest food trade pivots. In 2025, new U.S. carbon border taxes added up to 18% in charges on Brazilian meat and sugar exports. Brazil responded not with retaliation, but redirection. Canadian provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan created a fast-track import program with Brazilian giants like JBS and Marfrig. Within 6 months, Brazil was supplying nearly 20% of Canada's processed meat market. Manitoba began importing Brazilian sugarcane ethanol to meet green fuel mandates. Today, Brazil's agriculture ministry refers to Canada as its northern anchor, a title previously reserved for China and the U.S. Number 3, Chile. It's not making headlines, but grocery aisles on Canada's west coast are quietly transforming. Where apple bins and avocado crates once carried product of California, shoppers in Vancouver and Calgary now see product of Chile. This isn't a seasonal fluke. It's a structural shift that began gaining speed in early 2025. The cause wasn't politics, but produce. Behind closed doors, Chilean agricultural groups met with Canadian trade delegates to create a fast-track shipping agreement for fresh fruit, wine, and cold-stored goods. While U.S. regulations tightened with new cross-border inspections, Canadian rules proved simpler and faster. Walmart Canada jumped on the opportunity, signing a 3-year deal with Chile's National Association of Fruit Exporters for guaranteed shelf space for grapes, blueberries, and citrus, items once bound for U.S. stores. The logic was simple. Avoid bottlenecks, cut spoilage, and meet Canada's growing appetite for traceable global produce. For Chile, Canada offered a strategic win, a reliable G7 market without the threat of sudden tariffs or port delays. The results are measurable. In the first quarter of 2025, Chile's fruit exports to Canada rose 22%, while shipments to the U.S. fell 15% due to clearance slowdowns. This isn't a diplomatic dispute. It's a calculated redirection of agricultural loyalty, and it's only the start. Number 4, South Korea. In 2025, new U.S. packaging and labeling rules caused delays for popular Korean brands like Ottogi, Nongshim, and Samyang. Faced with blocked shipments, South Korea pivoted. In just 5 months, it redirected over $150 million in food exports from the U.S. to Canada. Costco Canada signed exclusive deals with top Korean brands, and grocery chains across the country doubled their Korean product offerings. In Metro Vancouver, Korean soy sauce outsold American varieties for the first time. This move wasn't sudden. Korean trade officials had been preparing since late 2024, anticipating trouble with U.S. customs. Canada's clear regulations and quick port processing made it the safer bet. Now, Korean companies are building semi-permanent distribution hubs in Halifax and Toronto, calling Canada Asia's bridge to North American kitchens. Number 5, France. When French wine lands in Moncton before Manhattan, it's a sign of change. In 2025, after the US imposed 25% tariffs on premium European foods, France began rerouting high-end products to Canada. Exports to Canada jumped 18% in 9 months, surpassing 22 billion Canadian dollars for the first time. Luxury brands like Veuve Clicquot now send a third of their North American supply through Vancouver and Montreal. Canadian retailers have responded with dedicated French aisles, backed by a trade agreement that shields them from US tariff changes. For France, this is more than a business shift. It's cultural. High-end French goods now reach Canadians faster and often at lower prices than Americans, strengthening Canada's role as a culinary ally. Number 6. Mexico. For decades, it was straightforward. The U.S. fed Mexico, and Mexico fed the U.S. Trucks loaded with avocados, strawberries, and tequila crossed the border daily. But in 2025, renewed trade disputes and politically charged inspections began choking the flow. Mexico made a historic call. It turned north, but to Canada, not the United States. It began with produce. Delays at the southern U.S. border left Mexican avocados spoiling in transit. Exporters from Michoacán, once tied to Californian buyers, approached Canadian grocery chains eager for fresh supply. Loblaw and Metro moved quickly, offering refrigerated rail routes and upfront payments to secure the goods. In 6 months, Canadian imports of Mexican fruit soared over 30%, while U.S. buyers scrambled to renegotiate contracts amid political uncertainty. And the shift didn't end there. Mexico's spirits industry, tequila and mezcal, faced new U.S. labeling hurdles, so Canadian liquor boards ramped up orders, promoting South of the North campaigns that made Mexican spirits household names in Vancouver, Edmonton, and beyond. Tortilla and salsa producers redirected shipments from Los Angeles to Montreal, praising smoother inspections and better shelf turnover. Mexican logistics firms even redrew distribution maps, routing goods through Manzanillo straight to Canada's Pacific ports, bypassing the U.S. entirely. A new NAFTA Plus produce agreement between Mexico and Canada now guarantees tariff-free food trade, even as U.S. talks remain deadlocked. This isn't Mexico abandoning its neighbor, but it's a sharp hedge. And in groceries, where freshness is measured in hours, that hedge means serious business. Number 7. India. You can smell the change before you see it. Turmeric, cumin, and cardamom filling Canadian grocery aisles like never before. For decades, India's exports of spices, lentils, rice, and tea flowed steadily to the U.S. That changed in 2024 when tighter U.S. food safety reviews and new import quotas created months-long delays at ports like Newark and Long Beach. Containers sat, contracts lapsed, and India, the world's largest supplier of lentils and basmati rice, quietly turned to Canada. Ontario trade officials responded with fast-track clearance lanes for Indian products. Within months, exporters rerouted huge volumes of dry goods to Toronto and Vancouver instead of Boston or Houston. Chains like Sobeys and Longo's locked in multi-year exclusivity deals with major Indian spice producers, guaranteeing shelf space and reliable restocking. By early 2025, Indian spice imports into Canada had jumped more than 20%, while U.S. imports dropped 12% in the same period. The shift extended beyond dry goods. Frozen parathas, pickled vegetables, and Ayurvedic health products once bound for New York now stock shelves in Calgary and Ottawa. With Canada's growing South Asian population and steady trade rules, India sees a long-term partner it can count on, while U.S. retailers watch their priority status slip. Number 8. United Kingdom. It wasn't Brexit that caused the shift. It was biscuits, tea, clotted cream, and lemon curd. Once reliably found on U.S. shelves, these British staples are now flooding Canada instead. By late 2024, post-Brexit trade complexity and new U.S. food labeling laws added friction to UK-U.S. grocery flows. American buyers demanded extra audits. British exporters balked. Canada stepped in. Within 10 months, UK food exports to Canada surged 21%. Provincial import agencies waived some secondary packaging rules, and grocery chains launched UK heritage sections with goods from Cornwall, Yorkshire, and Kent. Liverpool's port even restructured major shipping routes to send containers to Halifax rather than New Jersey. In early 2025, the UK's Department for Business and Trade ranked Canada as its most stable North American food partner, a claim unthinkable a decade ago. British goods are now appearing in rural Canadian towns as well as major cities, signaling not just lost sales for the US, but a cultural fracture in a long-standing bond. Number 9. Japan. It began quietly empty shelves in San Francisco where miso, matcha, and soy sauce once sat, and fully stocked shelves in Toronto where they suddenly appeared. For decades, Japan's golden rule for North America was simple: the US comes first. In 2025, that rule was abandoned. The trigger? A US customs overhaul targeting East Asian food imports with added inspections and longer delays. Tokyo had warned Washington since 2023, but saw no change. Canada, however, responded quickly, expanding pre-clearance agreements, speeding port procedures, and offering something Japan felt it had lost in the US: respect. The result was immediate. In the first half of 2025, over $3.2 billion in Japanese grocery exports shifted to Canada, a 34% year-on-year jump. Sushi-grade fish now lands in Vancouver instead of Los Angeles. Tamari and ponzu stock shelves in Calgary and Montreal before anywhere in the US. Tea producers signed exclusives with Canadian chains, and Japanese snacks like mochi and pickled plums are now mainstream in Canada. Then came the symbolic blow in an internal policy update. Japan named Canada, not the United States, as its primary North American food partner. That's not a typo, it's a public reset of trust. For Japan, food exports aren't just trade, they're cultural diplomacy. And when that trust faltered, Canada offered open ports, predictable rules, and a handshake that mattered. Trade wars don't always explode. Sometimes they fade away. And with Japan's pivot, the message to America is clear. No loyalty lasts forever, even at the dinner table. Canada's on the rise. The question is, for how long? If you enjoyed this deep dive, kindly do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thank you.